You built this entire thing, right? So, explain it to my daughter immediately.
That's what Roman Bell, CEO of Apex Grid Denver, said to me right in front of everyone. His daughter, Lilah, maybe 23, had just breezed into the control floor like she'd owned the skyline since birth. No ID, no clearance, just rose gold headphones, a latte, and a smug nod to security. I stood there, Marcus Vell, 46, director of systems, watching this TikTok-certified prodigy take the seat I had occupied for 11 years. Why? Because Roman said,
"The future needs fresh blood."
I stayed silent. I walked to my desk. I opened the override terminal. My fingers moved with surgical calm. 4 seconds later, $950 million of predictive logistics? Gone. She turned to me, smiling like it was a joke only she understood. "Oh, you're Marcus. Dad said you'd walk me through everything before you left." Before I left. That sentence hit harder than any formal notice. There'd been no memo, no warning, no restructuring announcement. It's just that casual throwaway line, spoken with lip gloss and zero comprehension. Roman didn't flinch, just adjusted his cufflinks like this was routine. At that moment, something cracked. Not anger, not yet. Just a pressure in my chest, like a sealed valve starting to hiss. I realized the transition had already happened. I just hadn't been told. When I got back to my office, something felt off. The lighting seemed colder. The interface on my main screen took a second longer to load. My access logs were missing their usual header timestamps. Tiny fractures in the familiar quiet clues that the system no longer recognized me as its owner. I tapped into the admin console. Denied. Again, denied. On the third attempt, I knew the system had flagged me as obsolete before Roman opened his mouth. My credentials weren't revoked, they were rerouted. Then the message hit my secondary terminal. Meeting. Now. No sender. No subject. Executive Core. RM14. That room was never used for casual anything. My breath slowed. I grabbed my notebook, not needed, and walked past the digital operations hub I had architected from the ground up. As I passed, Lilah was already in my old chair, spinning it lightly with her foot, humming. Something inside me whispered they'd already started the handoff. I just hadn't been cleared to notice. Room 14 was already half-lit when I arrived. Glass walls, one long steel table, and 3 people waiting as a script had already been written. Roman sat at the head, suit perfect, eyes locked on his smartwatch like I wasn't worth a glance. Beside him, usually warm and overly chatty, Monica from HR, now folded into that corporate neutral silence that screams termination. And across from them, of course, Lilah, tablet in hand, legs crossed, looking like the next keynote speaker at a tech summit she didn't understand. "Marcus," Roman began, voice flat, "you've given a lot to Apex Grid. 11 years. Several systems. A legacy." He paused, then shifted his tone just enough to sting. "It's time we align leadership with where the market is heading, not where it's been." 12 words later, the guillotine dropped. "Lilah will be spearheading that evolution with your guidance and transition." I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I watched Monica slide a folder across the table like she offered a menu, not an exit. Inside, my severance. Signed. Final. Lilah smiled like she'd won a scholarship. "This is such a strong foundation to inherit," she beamed. Inherit. As if I had died. I stood slowly. I didn't rage, I didn't beg. I just asked, "Am I allowed to say goodbye to my team?" No one said a word when I stepped back onto the floor. No glances, no murmurs. Just the quiet hum of servers and the tap of keys. Business as usual, as if nothing had happened. I walked to my office, the one with my name still etched on the glass, and stood in the doorway momentarily. 11 years were reduced to 4 walls and a cardboard box. The air felt thinner. Once a command center, my desk now looked like someone else's workspace. My mugs, framed picture of my dog Scout, And the custom keyboard I'd built myself all looked borrowed, like they never really belonged to me. People passed my door. No one stopped. Not even Monica. Not even Raj from Systems, who once pulled 3 all-nighters with me to patch the Phoenix node outage. I packed in silence, deliberate, controlled. I refused to give this place the performance it wanted. When I finally closed the flaps on the box, I placed my badge on the center of the desk face up, coming forward like a gravestone. No tears, no scene, just departure, unnoticed, unspoken, but not unfinished. I was sealing the last flap of the box when I noticed a shadow pause just outside my door. I didn't look up not until I heard the soft knock. It was Jonah. 34, my protege, my friend, the guy I pulled out of QA 6 years ago because I saw something in him. He stepped in, eyes down, voice low. Marcus. I didn't know how else to handle it. My jaw locked. You signed it, Jonah. He winced. I didn't want to. Roman said it was either approved for the transition or to watch half the department restructured. You had a choice, I said evenly. You made it. He nodded slowly. I have a kid now. Mortgage. You know how it is. I looked at him. Looked. And all I saw was a man trying to disappear inside a lanyard. Yeah, I said. I also remember when you used to have a spine. Jonah didn't argue. He just stood there, swallowing whatever pride he had left. Then he turned to leave. But before he did, I asked the question, which was already burning a hole in my chest. When did they strip my admin credentials? He froze mid-step. 4 days ago, he said quietly. They said it was just protocol, preparing the system for transition. I nodded once. No emotion, just math. 4 days ago, they had planned this while I was still here debugging, deploying patches, and running integrity checks to protect a $950 million ecosystem they were already rewriting without me. I looked down at the badge, still sitting on my desk. My name, my title, my system. The access might have been gone, but the design, the structure, that still lived in my bones. And bones, remember. I didn't go home right away. The box sat untouched in the back seat of my car as I drove around the edges of Denver, no destination, just space to breathe. When I finally stepped into my apartment, I left the lights off. The silence felt cleaner that way. Instead of unpacking, I powered up my laptop, the old one. No Apex grid connections, no network bleed, just me, a black screen, and a clean slate. I opened my archived emails and typed a phrase I hadn't thought about in years. Intellectual property transfer, 2018. There it was. A thread from Apex Grid Legal asked me to sign over the architectural rights to the system I had built, Verdicts. I remembered refusing, not because I expected to be pushed out, but because the language had been deliberately vague. Too vague. Without my consent. It would have given them the power to resell, relicense, and even retrofit the system for commercial use. I scrolled to my last response. It was still there. Unless revised to reflect collaborative ownership or limited use scope, I cannot authorize this transfer. They never replied. I never followed up. And more importantly, they never got my signature. Something clicked. I searched again for internal counsel notes and found a buried memo from October 2018. A legal footnote, easily missed, but now glowing like a flare in my mind. Due to Marcus Vell's independent development of verdicts before integration, a signature is required to enforce full ownership. Without it, IP rights remain contestable. There it was, in writing. From their legal team. They had replaced me without securing the very system they were betting their future on. Verdicts wasn't theirs. Not fully. Not legally. They thought they could inherit the house. But they never got the deed. I closed the laptop, sat back in my chair, and stared into the dark. No joy, no triumph, just clarity. I wasn't erased. I was underestimated. And now I was awake. They thought they'd locked me out. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd spun up a mirrored test environment 3 years earlier during a high-risk migration sprint. A sandbox, tucked beneath Apex Grid's infrastructure, was created for performance simulations, QA integrity checks, and crisis scenarios no one wanted to acknowledge. I called it GhostLayer. It was never on the primary admin registry. It had no links to the HR network. There are no audit trails. Just a dummy account MVEL, Beta 43, quietly humming in a dark corner of the architecture. Untouched, invisible, and fully authenticated. I logged in at 3:14 a.m. The dashboard came alive like it had been waiting for me. From there, I watched. Lilah had already begun editing Vertex's core schema renaming modules, removing key validation layers and flattening dynamic logic into brittle, hard-coded scripts. She was building on top of my foundation like a TikTok filter, flashy, unstable, and worse, unsupervised. There is no version control. There are no rollback snapshots. There are no integrity checkpoints. She just had her fingers on the code and didn't understand. I drilled into the admin logs. Every change had her user ID stamped on it. Every oversight, every risky edit, every removed safeguard, her fingerprints were everywhere. I didn't touch anything. Not yet. This wasn't about revenge. This was about leverage. And I still had one last layer built deep into Vertex. A security node called Failsafe Zero. I had installed it quietly during the early development phases, meant only to trigger during catastrophic permission escalations or unauthorized root access. It was designed to freeze Vertex entirely. Do not delete anything, lock it in place. No outputs, no processing. A full systemic stall. Back then, I thought of it as disaster insurance. Tonight, I rewrote its conditions. If admin MVEL, Beta 43 is removed or disabled, activate Failsafe Zero. Then I encrypted the command, buried it under 6 decoy comments, and ran a stealth confirmation. I also exported a full PDF of the system logs, every timestamped entry tied to Lilah's edits, and named it inheritance log.pdf. Because if she wanted to inherit Vertex, she'd inherit every flaw she created, too. No rage, no flame. It's just a quiet trap waiting for one more move. They'd taken my name off the door, but the system, it still listened to my hands. And now, it had new instructions. The email came at 10:26 a.m., a soft chime on my phone, still synced to the old Apex Grid terminal I hadn't bothered disconnecting. No greeting, no explanation, just 5 words in the subject line. Access privileges were permanently revoked. Effective immediately. No signature, no courtesy, just silence where my name used to be. They thought it was the final nail. But to me, it was permission. I closed the email, sipped my coffee, and let the moment settle. And then the phone rang, an unknown number. I almost let it go. But something instinct maybe made me answer. Mr. Vell, the voice said, precise, polished. This is Ren Carter, Executive VP of Infrastructure at Solvanta Dynamics. I sat up. Solvanta, the same company Apex Grid had outbid last year for the Interlink Logistics contract. Their entire predictive framework had gone dark after losing out to my system. We've heard changes were made at Apex Grid, Ren continued, and some instabilities followed. I said nothing. He didn't seem to mind. We'd prefer not to reinvent the wheel, he said, especially when the architect behind it is still active. Still, I stayed silent, letting him feel the weight of the pause. We'd like to bring you in, Marcus, he added. Full control, clean budget. There are no legacy restrictions, equity included. You'd lead the architecture team and be free to build your system your way. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a rewrite, a reset, the chance to build again without politics, without stolen credit, without having to explain basic infrastructure to a CEO's daughter with a marketing degree. I leaned back and glanced at the badge I'd left on the desk the day before. They'd revoked access and erased my presence. Perfect. I'm interested, I said. But not over the phone. Understood, Wren replied. We'll fly you in first class tomorrow morning. Tomorrow works. He thanked me, gave me a direct contact line, and hung up. I stared out the window for a long minute. They thought deleting my credentials would bury me, but it only cleared the path. They tried to replace the architect. Now, the architect was about to redesign the future. The flight to Solvanta's Seattle campus was smooth. First-class cabin, no small talk. Just quiet, clean air and a black coffee that didn't taste like cardboard. My mind, though, was anything but still. While the world thought I'd been sidelined, I was already sketching version 2 of verdicts, lighter, cleaner, leaner. No legacy rot. No boardroom anchors. Wren Carter met me at the terminal himself, mid-40s, tailored suit, the kind of executive who listens before speaking. With him was Alia Chen, their CTO, calm, quiet, eyes sharp enough to cut code. By 3 p.m., I was in a glass-walled briefing room overlooking Lake Union, walking them through the mistakes Apex Grid would soon regret. By 6, a private sandbox server had been provisioned in Solvanta's dev cluster. Clean, untouched, waiting for something real. But before I logged in, I checked one more thing. I opened a browser and searched *verdicts*, the rebranded name. Lilah had slapped across the original framework like glitter on wet concrete. Press releases, a TechCrunch article, even a glossy YouTube keynote thumbnail of her standing in a white suit, gesturing at flowcharts she probably couldn't pronounce. And then I saw it. U.S. Copyright Office filing. Filed by Lilah Bell. Title, Verdicts Predictive Engine. Original software architecture. Date, last Tuesday. My mouth didn't move, but my fingers curled. She hadn't just inherited the system, she had claimed authorship and registered it as her own. And worse, the descriptive summary? The line for line lifted from the internal white paper I'd written in 2019, never published, never uploaded, but time-stamped and stored offline in my encrypted archive. This wasn't ignorance, this was theft. But I didn't text Wren, I didn't rant, I didn't post. I opened Solvanta's legal submission portal, anonymous. I dragged in my original white paper, the metadata logs from GhostLayer, and system change timestamps all neatly compiled, filed under infringement claim, prior art violation, and hit submit. No noise, no confrontation. It's just a silent tripwire, waiting. The next morning, the live stream launched on time, 10 a.m. sharp. Apex Grid presents The Future of Logistics, powered by Verdicts X. I watched from my hotel room. Stage lights, corporate music. Lilah is in full command, white blazer, rehearsed smile, overly confident tone. This system, she announced, was designed by digital natives for the world ahead. I stirred my tea. Behind her, the demo screen flickered through predictive dashboards, live tracking displays, and API visualization. It all looked sleek. Until she said, "Let's showcase real-time vendor load prediction powered by Verdicts X's proprietary engine." She clicked, and the screen blinked. Red, then static, then a burst of cascading error code. Error 504, distributed server timeout. Unauthorized script detected. Core logic interrupted. Recovery unavailable. The audience shifted. Phones came out. Her smile faltered. Behind her, the animation stuttered, froze, and then collapsed entirely, flashing a full failure report pulled from Apex Grid's internal node. The same node where Failsafe Zero had quietly waited. Lilah stammered and tried to ad-lib something about unexpected latency, but her hand was trembling. The hashtags started rolling. Number, Verdicts X crash. Number, demo fail. Lilah Bell meltdown. I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. I just sat quietly, watching the storm roll in. Because this wasn't sabotage. It was the response. They removed the safety valves. erased the audits, built on something they didn't understand, and then stood on it, proudly, without checking the foundation. At 11:24 a.m., my phone buzzed. A Slack notification from Solvanta's internal thread. Ren had posted a screen grab of the trending headline. Vertex X failure wipes $200 million off Apex Grid's market cap in 17 minutes. Underneath, just one message. Ready when you are. I set the phone down. I took another sip of tea and smiled just once. Because they thought the end came when they revoked my access. But the real collapse? That began the moment they thought they could fake genius. The call came at 3:31 p.m. Just as I finalized a logic schema for Solvanta's supply chain stream, I recognized the number before the second ring. Roman Bell. I let it ring once more, then answered calmly. Marcus, he said, voice lower than I'd ever heard. The confidence was gone. What remained was something closer to controlled panic. We've run into a situation on our end. He began like we were still colleagues. The system's frozen. Core functions are locked. Live vendor coordination is stalled. There's an indication your legacy credentials were involved. I didn't say a word. Just let him speak into the silence. I know this is unusual, he continued, but if you have any insight into what might have triggered the error, something buried from earlier builds, perhaps we'd appreciate your help. This isn't a demand, Marcus. Just a request. Professional to professional. There it was, the spin. The soft ask laced with desperation. I stepped from my desk and walked to the window, looking across Seattle's skyline. You want me to fix it? I said evenly. Yes, Roman replied quickly. Not permanently, just enough to stabilize. We're willing to compensate. Consultant level rate, retroactive credit on the platform. You won't even need to be involved long term. That made me laugh softly. Credit? I repeated. After you handed my system to your daughter and had me escorted out like a temp? Roman paused. I could hear him breathing through his nose tight, controlled. It's your work, Marcus, he said. Don't you care that it's falling apart? I closed my laptop. Of course I do, I said. That's why I made sure it would fall without me. Another silence. Deeper now. The kind of silence that only happens when someone realizes they don't have leverage anymore. I'm not your employee, I added. I don't owe you anything. He didn't respond right away. Just breathed. Then finally, good luck, Marcus. Click. That was the last time I would ever speak to Roman Bell. I didn't feel triumphant. What I felt was heavier, older, like closing the final chapter of a book that had been rewriting itself in the background of my life for over a decade. There had always been a part of me quiet, unreasonable, that hoped someone would notice. That someone upstairs would finally recognize what I had built, what I had held together. But no one ever sees the scaffolding, just the glass. They saw the shine. I held the steel. And when they pushed me out, they thought the building would stand independently. It didn't. That evening, I received a short encrypted message from Jonah. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. They've called 3 emergency board meetings. Legal teams from Trexar and Omniport are already on site. Attached is a screenshot. #VertexX collapse, trending #1 on tech Twitter. Apex Grid stock down 19.4%. At the bottom, Jonah had added 2 words. You warned them. I stared at the screen for a long time, not out of satisfaction but out of clarity. They hadn't fallen because I sabotaged them. They fell because they erased someone who knew where the load-bearing walls were. Later that night, I walked through Solvanta's innovation wing, the new one, still under construction, 1 floor up from where I now worked. The hallway lights flickered softly in the silence, casting long shadows across clean glass. At the end of the hall, a brushed metal plaque had been installed on the door to the new operations lab. It read, Marcus Vell, Chief Systems Architect. No fanfare, no speech, just recognition engraved and real. I stood in front of it momentarily, hand resting on the handle, before stepping inside. This wasn't a comeback. This was a redefinition. And I hadn't just survived the collapse. I designed its replacement. Exactly 1 year to the day after I walked out of Apex Grid with a cardboard box and my name wiped from every system I had built, I returned to that same downtown Denver address. But it didn't say Apex Grid anymore. The name etched into the polished steel outside the lobby entrance now read, Solvanta Global Systems. The building hadn't changed structurally. It has the same glass walls. They have the same rotating doors. It's the same marble lobby. But the energy? It was different now, focused, grounded, real. I stepped inside, not with hesitation but with certainty. My badge, now black and silver with a fingerprint icon, beeped once against the new security panel. A soft green glow confirmed what the old system never had. Access granted. A portrait hung to the right of the reception desk, framed in matte black steel, black and white, clean, shot candidly from behind. In it, I was mid-sentence, pointing toward a whiteboard full of raw architecture diagrams during Solvanta's internal summit. Slight wind in my shirt. Focus on my eyes. Below it, etched in clean serif font, Marcus Vell, Architect of Continuity. The receptionist looked up from her tablet and smiled. "That's you, isn't it?" she asked. I gave a slight nod. She blinked. "It's kind of legendary, what you built." I didn't reply. I just offered a quiet thanks and walked toward the elevators. Inside the lift, a younger systems analyst stepped in beside me. It couldn't have been older than 25. "Morning, Mr. Vell," he said nervously. "It's an honor, sir. No questions. No flattery. Just acknowledgement." At the top floor, I walked past the glass-enclosed collaboration zones teams, sketching real frameworks, not PowerPoint fluff, no inflated job titles, no visionary buzzwords, just work. My office, yes, my actual office, was at the far end. Door etched with my title. The desk faces the Rockies instead of a conference room wall. I opened the door, stepped inside, and Saturday. No applause. No camera, just the hum of systems running the way they were designed to. The file on my desk read, Verdicts 2.1 Patent Authorization, Final Draft. I lifted my brass pen, the same one Apex Grid had given me at my 10-year mark, back when they still pretended to care. It still bore the inscription, To Those Who Build Quietly. I signed the document, and just as the ink dried, I whispered more to myself than anyone else. You replaced my name, but not my mind. By afternoon, Ren and Alia called a whole hand in the dev auditorium. Today, Ren announced, we submit final paperwork to lock global naming rights and IP protections for verdicts under Solvanta systems. He looked at me. None of this exists without one man. There was no need to stand, no need to speak. Everyone already knew. Later that week, the news dropped quietly but not unnoticed. Roman Bell was removed as CEO. Apex Grid Board cites operational instability. No photo, no quote. It's just a 2-line blurb on page 3 of the financial section. But that wasn't the surprise. The real surprise came in an internal notice forwarded to my desk the next morning. Apex Grid enters early-stage merger talks with Solvanta. Attached is the preliminary term sheet. At the bottom, the signature pending. Jonah Reyes, Acting CEO, Apex Grid Inc. I stared at the name for a long time. Not angry, not smug, just still. The man who had once signed my severance, voice shaking, eyes down, now sat in the chair Roman used to guard like a throne. Fate doesn't shout. It choreographs. I didn't expect a call from Jonah, but it came 3 days later. Marcus, he said, we've got cleanup to do, and no one knows the bones like you. I'm not here to salvage what collapsed, I replied. I'm here to build what comes after. He paused, then nodded. That's exactly why we want you in the room, not under. That afternoon, I approved my first cross-platform deployment plan under Solvanta Apex Grid. Not to reclaim territory, but to rewire it from the inside out. This wasn't revenge. This was renewal. And this time, my name was carved into the code. 1 year later, I stood alone in the newly completed strategy lab at Solvanta's Denver headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in golden morning light, casting long shadows across polished concrete and matte black server consoles. The hum was familiar, grounding. Across the room, a new generation of engineers gathered around a whiteboard sketching, arguing, building. They didn't glance my way. They didn't need to. The foundation was already in place. I turned toward the far wall, where the digital systems map stretched 18 feet wide, animated in real time. Every live node, every logistics line, every city. The engine I once called Vertex now powered nearly 62% of North America's distributed inventory systems. Seamless, transparent, undisputed. Behind me, a small voice spoke. "Mr. Vell?" I turned. It was Devon, an intern, maybe 20, holding a rolled-up blueprint and an energy drink too big for his hands. "I read your file, the one about the GhostLayer. You built that before anyone knew it was even needed." I smiled just slightly. I built it because I knew one day someone might forget who held the keys. He blinked. "It's Ganya, sir." I didn't correct him, just nodded. "Get to work, Devon," I said, "and build it so no one ever has to fix it." As he left, I stepped forward and tapped the glass display. The Vertex engine expanded into a spiraling, elegant lattice, clean, exact, alive. Not a comeback. It's not revenge. A signature, signed not with noise or ego, but with foresight, with design, with ownership. They tried to erase my name, but they forgot. You can't overwrite a system when the architect still lives in its code. And I'm still here, still standing, still building. I never built systems to make things run. I built them to hold, to absorb pressure, to outlast chaos. What they took from me wasn't a job, it was the illusion that loyalty guarantees security. But I gained something far more valuable in losing that illusion: clarity. You see, sometimes the most dangerous thing they can do is underestimate you. They think silence means weakness, that walking away implies defeat. What they don't realize is that some of us do our best work quietly. Some of us don't shout when we're erased, we recode. I didn't burn bridges, I built tunnels. I didn't post rage, I wrote logic. And when the moment came, the system they thought they controlled remembered who had laid its bones. This story isn't about revenge, it's about response. It's about knowing your value so clearly that no one else gets to define it. It's about designing your future with the same intention you once gave to a company that no longer deserved your best. So, if you've ever been overlooked, replaced, or told you're too much for the room you helped build, remember this: they can take the title, they can change the locks, but they can't delete the architecture you left behind. And if you stay steady, stay sharp, and remain quiet just long enough, you won't have to take back your power. It'll return to you by design. Because of real architects, we never vanish. We reappear with blueprints in hand,